Live? We're here. We're here. We're here. Hey, how's it going? And welcome to 3D and motion graphics for entertainment advertising with concept arts. Glad to have you here live, and then glad to have you here live. Thank you all for coming. Yeah. We always rehearse the applause. It never goes as planned. If you're looking for closed captioning, go ahead and if you're watching on YouTube, you can stay right there. Or if you want to view us on Facebook, we also have closed captioning there. First and foremost, I'd love to send out a huge thank you to our sponsor, Dell. Without them, we wouldn't be able to provide you with the amazing streams as you're watching right now and all the other awesome streams that are going to be coming up. So thank you, Dell. We really appreciate it. Okay, so another glorious rant from Chris over here at Gnomon talking about why I'm so excited about tonight. If you're familiar with Gnomon, one of the most exciting things about being here and seeing the students is all the students are very different in what they want to do, right? Sometimes you see hyper stylized stuff. Sometimes you see like a lot of crazy visual effects. Other times you'll see really realistic things. It's really, really cool to see all of the different art that the students can make. But one of the great things I really like about the events is also seeing what you can do with all those different skills and all the people that come in here and talk about the different things that they do and the different careers that they're in, and it's always very, very exciting and really cool. Now, I luckily got to spend a little bit of time with these folks over here, but now you all get to spend some time with them. So if you can all just take a second and pause from eating your pizza and help me welcome Concept Arts.
Hey guys, thank you Chris very much. Walking around this place, I really wish I would have gone here. I didn't go anywhere, but I wish I would have. If I would have gone somewhere, I would have liked to gone here. I was telling these guys earlier, like I've watched a ton of Gnomon classes over the years. Most of them I paid for, but like there really is, I got a huge education from this stuff, and it really is a special kind of unique place from everything I've seen. So. We're from Concept Arts, which is an entertainment advertising company. I'm from the print division, but we also do, oh, sorry, let me say, this is Gregory. Sorry.
Hello. Nice
I'm
to
Curtis,
see
this is
you
Gregory, this is Hong.
all. Hi.
And we do trailers as well, we do digital social, we do brand as well. So we started as a print company about 40 years ago in the garage of Ron and Lucinda or Michelson. And their little son was like 2 years old at that time, and now he runs the company. So it's still just a family-owned thing. There's bigger shops than us, there's smaller shops than us. We're kind of in the middle, but we end up kind of working on, like, as you can see, I think, a lot of the stuff we did, like that kind of started the company off was like the Matrix, that like kind of put us on the map. And then since then, we've kind of evolved into doing, like Jurassic World and Mission Impossible and all these kind of things. But it's like, but the nice thing I like about our company is that it's small enough that it's still a family feel and everyone's friendly and everyone, it doesn't feel like a corporate environment, and kind of what I wanted to talk about today is like, I could sit here and like show you our work and be like, hey, look how cool we are. We have some cool work, that's great. But I kind of think back to when I was learning this stuff and what I would want to hear from somebody on stage. And to me, that's like, I want to know, like, first of all, you guys you probably want jobs in this industry, right? Like, it's not just about the learning. You're probably wondering, how does that work? And then you're probably wondering, like, okay, these people that make this stuff, they must be really smart. They must be really good at what they do, And you get there, but you don't start there, and none of us do. And so the point I want to drive home today is that, like, we all started as students. We all started as people who had no idea what we're doing. And you just sort of figure it out. And the 3D, like, there's a lot of different aspects to entertainment advertising, but like, the one thing about 3D and motion graphics is it evolves constantly, and you just have to figure it out. And you're going to hear that statement a lot tonight because we've been talking about that a lot. It's like, that's our whole truism, is that, like, we don't necessarily know what we're doing half the time, but we figure it out. And so, there's a thing that happens with 3D stuff, right? Like, most times, you're going to be a person who learns a discipline. You're going to pick that discipline. You're going to be like, I am a rigger. And you're going to go be a rigger, and you're going to work on a big production, or you're going to work in a video game, and that's what you do, and you get really good at that one thing. And that's fantastic if you're that kind of mentality. That's great. And maybe, probably some of you are, but I never really considered myself like a one discipline kind of person. Like, I always considered, like, 3D, it was so exciting to see all the different types of things you could do, like shading, lighting, like posing, modeling, all these different things that I wanted to know all of it, and then I found a place where I could do all those things. And so I'm kind of here to tell you that, like, you can be an artist and a 3D person, and you can do all those things. You could be a generalist, and there are jobs in the entertainment industry for that. Granted, it's probably not as big of an avenue as, going to work at ILM, but there's a huge, there's these little untapped places that, like, if you are the kind of person where you're like, I want to be an artist too. I want to draw, and I want to make stuff, and then I want to, like, see it through, and I want to animate that character. Like, that stuff exists. So that's just to say, is like, this talk could be for anybody who doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, I have to be that one thing, or what should I be, Like, I remember when I was a kid and people asking you, like, what do you want to do with your life? I'm like, I don't know, I'm 18, like, drink beer? Like, like, I hadn't thought through, I've never thought through my life at all. And so when people had asked me that question, I never knew the answer to it. And so it was the same thing when I found entertainment graphics. It was kind of haphazard, but I always just followed the stuff I liked doing. And so that's just to go to say what, like, even though I've been doing this stuff for like 25 years, there's a lot of experience on this panel, we still feel like we don't know what we're doing. And I think that's an important thing to understand that people don't like to talk about, is that, like, even as high as the guys and making, like, the big VFX films, they're still just figuring it out. They're still looking at this stuff going, like, okay, the director's asking to make this spaceship flip around and do this thing, and you're like, I don't know how to do that yet. No, but you just sit there and you grind it out and you figure it out. And because you kind of love this stuff, it works out in the end. You find a way to make it happen. And on that respect, I'm going to show you some stuff that's older, and I'm going to go through the process of it, and you might look at it and go, that doesn't seem right. Like, why are you rigging like a high poly model? Why is a thing, you got to understand when you're doing this stuff, the public just sees the finished product. The client just sees the finished product. No one cares how the sausage gets made. Like, as a student, I know that you have to be correct in every way, and you're trying to like do the best possible configuration of like, you're trying to build these files in the best way, right? But in our world, the time constraints are your enemy. Time is the enemy of everything in our world. And so we look at each other and go, should we UV that thing? And you're like, no. Like, it's gonna take me 5 hours. Do you have 5 hours? You go, no. And so you go, well, can I just lay a texture on Photoshop or something? Like, do some quick thing, and if it looks good, it looks good. And there's a lot of our business, and because we're also a small team, like, our company has 100 people, but there's only 3 of us, and then we have some freelancers once in a while. We don't have a huge resource bank of like 3D artists to go like, I'm not that great at like, figuring out how to do shaders in Redshift. How should I do that? And there's no one, it's like, well, you either figure it out or it just looks like crap. And we present crap, and we're not allowed to present crap. Like, the clients just will look at it and be like, this has to be better. So we just, what works for us is just this mentality always of just like, we'll figure it out. We'll go on YouTube, we'll go on places like Gnomon, we'll go on Pluralsight or one of these places, and we'll just figure it out. And that's like, and even if you go to a big company or anything, it's the same truisms across the board. Like, 3D advances so quickly, and now with AI coming, like, you guys are gonna be in this stage, you're in this very unique place that no one has been at, where AI is going to change 3D and motion graphics, and no one knows how. Like, everyone's looking at each other going, do you know what this is gonna do? And no one knows. Anyone tells you they know what AI is gonna do, they don't. But it is going to do something. And so as long as you guys are like, I'll figure it out. I will adjust. I will roll with the punches, and I will figure out how to use this new thing. I saw today that NVIDIA, I think they're going to put something in Maya that allows like text to, creation of like substance painter type stuff. And it's like, okay, gonna have to figure that one out. I don't know how to do that, but it's gonna be something I have to figure out. Consult my notes. Yeah, and so part of this also is just, I want to tell people that as an artist, it's difficult to imagine learning all this stuff. And as a 3D guy, it's so daunting to be like, I'm going to learn all these different disciplines, and then I'm going to try to like draw and figure this stuff out. But it's totally possible, especially as things progress and get easier. Like, this stuff is totally possible. And I'll show you, what I want to show you is some, like, the way we do that kind of stuff, because we're all expected to do all the things. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but a little bit myself so you can understand. I'm a creative director of print and 3D. And so I handle like movie campaigns for a bunch of, I oversee a lot of print art directors, and then I oversee 3D people in order to get them assets, to get them things to build for their posters or for their motion graphic stuff. So I kind of step into both worlds, where I have to deal with actually the posters getting designed and making sure those look good, and then also making sure the models and the renders, all that stuff comes together. That's not normally a thing you see, but it's just because I end up learning this stuff that works out. And sorry, my phone's turned off. So I didn't go to school at all. Out of high school, I got into a van and I went and toured playing in punk bands. Like, I had no aspirations of doing this stuff at all. Bands need flyers. Someone had to make the flyers and the merch and the things. And so I learned Photoshop because I was like, well, someone's got to do this. And from then like, you do it for one person, or you do it for yourself, and then somebody else asks you for it because they don't know how to do it. And then that snowballed into someone saying, if you learn HTML in a week, I'll get you a job coding websites. And I was like, okay. So I learned HTML, I got a book, I learned HTML, and I was terrible at it, but I got the job because no one else knew what they're doing. And then from there, I made websites for a while, and then someone came to me and said, do you want to make movie posters? because they had seen something I had done, and I said, not really. I don't have any interest in movie posters. And they said, we'll pay you double what you're making. And I said, that sounds really good. And so all that is to say, don't be ashamed of like, there's more money in advertising and movies. It's not a shameful thing. You're here to get a job for the most part. Like, and sometimes you go where the money is, you know. But it turned out I did like movie posters. So thankfully, it was not a bad decision. So I did movie posters for a while as a print guy, just doing Photoshop and doing that kind of thing. 7 or 8 years doing that stuff. And about when I was 30, I started getting really kind of burnt out doing that stuff. It's like when you're working on posters, you get this giant trove of photography, like 50,000 images from a movie. And they just say like, hey, Mario. And that's Mario. He works at Concept Arts as well. He's a creative director of motion graphics. And so after a while of working in Photoshop, I got to this feeling of like, I have these ideas, but I can't make them. I'm a slave to like whatever's in that photography. Whatever the guy decided to shoot on that day, I have to build with. And if I have a cool idea, I can't make it. And so we got this project for redesigning the Universal Studios logo. And they came to us knowing that we probably would fail, but they came to 30 other companies, and they're like, it was kind of like a gimme, because someone knew someone and was like, well, you can give it a shot. And knowing that they're probably going to go to like one of these other companies and do it. But I was determined. I was watching a lot of Mad Men, and I was like, I could do this. I could figure this out, you know? I could be Don Draper. And turns out I can't. But, you know, at the time, I remember the first episode of Mad Men, he had pitched one idea in a meeting. And I was like, we were giving like 70 or 80 comps on every project for every round. I'm like, could I just do one? Could I pick the one that I love and just say that's the one I'm doing? And so I was like, I pitched out to my company, and they're like, you can do that, but we're not going to do that. So they're like, you can do one, and then do your whole thing, and everybody else will chip in, and we'll try this. But I'm like, no, I got it. So I had this idea, and you got to forgive my drawing skills, but I had this idea that the Universal logo, the Universal company was, what is universal about them is that it connects people. And if you pulled back on the earth, and at night, people turn their lights on, their TVs on, all these things, and it kind of looks like a network in your brain. It kind of looks like neurons. It kind of looks like the nervous system. And that's kind of like, that's what connects people, and that's what connects in your body, and that's what connects people on this planet. And I just had this idea. I'm like, if we could just sell them on the idea of putting all these little lights turned on all over the world, it can feel like, oh, the whole world is illuminated by Universal. And I felt like I have this Mad Men, Don Draper type thing. I'm going to drive it home. So I made a whole storyboard on like what I thought was, you know, they didn't end up doing this, but I thought like, oh, you start with a little person in like Tahiti or something, and it goes to a suburban neighborhood, and you're watching all the lights come on, and then you pull out, and as the lights are coming on, then you rest on that. So you know, I didn't know how to build that. It never got built, but they did the last 10 seconds, or like the last 5 seconds of that. So then I go, okay, I got to figure out how to build this thing. I had gotten all this inspiration scrapped together, and I had hired a bunch of 3D guys, but I had no idea about 3D. I didn't know anything about it. All I'd ever learned was Photoshop and like, you know, website stuff. So I hired like 4 or 5 different 3D guys to each take a shot at it, and it was terrible. It was like to every single person gave me awful, and I just looked at it and was like, that's not what I'm trying to imagine. You know, like that's not what I want. And I kept trying. Going back and forth with these guys, going, no, like the lights, and make it like big and expansive, and make it curved, and do all these things. And I could not. It was either my fault for not being able to communicate with them, or maybe they were just bad 3D guys. That's also possible. But I think they were pretty good. I just didn't know how to communicate with them. So I got so frustrated, and we were getting down to the wire of being able to make our big presentation, that I was like, I'm gonna take how hard could Cinema 4D be? I'm just gonna take a shot. Like I'm just gonna get a book, I'm just gonna sit with it for a weekend and see what I could do. Turns out Cinema 4D is much harder than Photoshop. So it was a quick lesson on, oh my God, this is way different, this is a much bigger thing, but I limped it along to get to where I wanted. Like I just, and there's a lot of fakery and stuff, and this was the raw render of what I got. I used like an Illustrator file to make, to bevel out the type. I made it metal from like the pre-made grayscale gorilla shaders, and I figured out how to map the thing onto a ball. And I was like, you know, I look back on that and I'm like, now I could do that in 2 seconds. That was like a week of me figuring that out. You know, like I didn't know what I was doing, and it was, you know, it took a lot to get to that point. But when I got it there, I was like, okay, like I get it, that's something. And they liked it. The client liked it, but they were like, we have 30 other shops, we want to see variations. So then we went through we tried a retro version, we tried different, you know, they want to tilt it, they want to do things a little glowing. Granted, this didn't go super around the block, but this went on for about 1.5 years. Just like every month or so, they come back with, I like it, but I don't know. Can you make it better? And you're like, well, what does that mean? And you're like, you know, better. Okay, so you try again. But the cool thing was it took so long that every time I was just like up late at night learning Cinema 4D. So I got a little bit better every couple weeks. And every time I did it, I got a little bit better. So by the time we got to the end of it, I was like, I'm not good at this, but it's not bad. It's not terrible. And then at the end of the day, they approved the thing, and then they gave my logo to a company called Daniel Clark, and they redid it and made me look like I knew what I was doing. So, and then Weta took that, rebuilt it again, and made the animation. And so it looked like I knew what I was doing because somebody else who was much better than me took it over. But what it did for me was it all of a sudden is like, now I have this tool where I can like make anything out of my brain. And it's only limited by my own ability to make these things. Like it's really limited to how hard do I want to work, you know? And at the time, I really wanted to work hard. So I was like, it worked out really well with my mentality of just like, I was excited because I found this new thing. It's like Photoshop for me felt so small, and this felt so big. And then I started looking into like Maya and ZBrush and all these different things, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a gigantic world. I tried to learn like real flow, and I tried to like at the time and Houdini and all these things, and I definitely hit a point where I had to stop. But like this was for me like the way in. This was like an eye-opening, and I was 30, you know, like I completely decided. I just looked at my boss and said, I only want to do this from now on, and they said no, and I said okay, then I quit. And so I quit knowing that like I had a lot more learning in front of me. So I went and I became a freelancer so that I could work like 20 hours a week and just learn. And so then, you know, I started doing more and more of this stuff. And this next one was, I got a job called The Predator, which I'm sure you guys have seen, Predator. And it's something I've been watching since I was a little kid, you know. It was on TV all the time. It was a huge part of my childhood. Like the first movie to me is like one of those things that's ingrained in my brain. So when they told me you're gonna work on The Predator, I was like, oh, I want to make a head out of bones. I was just immediately, I was like, that sounds like a good idea. And so I drew it up, like, and I pitched it to the creative director. I was like, look, I'm gonna make this head out of the Predator head out of bones. And they're like, do you know how to do that? I was like, no. I'm like, okay, well, I'll give you 3 days to figure it out. Like, okay, which is way longer. Most comps for print, you get about half a day probably, maybe a day if it's a big, you know, big complicated things. But he was like, I'll give you 3 days to like try to figure this out. So then I had to like, I didn't know how to approach something like this because I'd never done anything like that. So I tried to do like procedurally. I looked at like MoGraph and I tried to figure out like maybe you put the bones on a skull and then like have it populate around. And that just didn't look right. And so I said like, okay, well maybe MASH. And MASH didn't work. And then it's like, maybe there's a particle system and I could like populate and things like that. And then I realized I'm like, I just have to do this by hand. I have to just piece this thing by hand. And so I got a skeleton model and I just started moving things around. And as you can see, like it's a high poly model, which I realize now was really dumb because my computer couldn't handle this at the end of the day, and the renders took about 30 hours, and and so like I had, and you know, if you see the side view, you can see I didn't even bother trying to like fill out the rest of this thing. I just got what's in the camera. Like I couldn't even be, you know, I had to just be like, what's here is what I'm going to do. But I got it to a place of looking cool, and I just hand moved piece by piece until I got it, and it, you know, took a few days of that. And then I wasn't quite adept enough to know how to render this thing with textures on it, or to, you know, to really figure this thing out. So I kind of rendered it in a very flat way so that I could put it in Photoshop. I knew that if I could get it in Photoshop with enough layers, I could just mess around and get it to the place where I wanted to be. But I didn't know how to get it in, because this was in Maya, and I didn't know Maya well enough to like dial it in. So I was just like, get it to me in Photoshop. So I made an ambient occlusion pass to give like shadows. I made an object thing because I figured, hey, worst case scenario, I go paint this thing by hand, and I just have little selections, and I paint each one of these things. And then I just made a bunch of different renders just to see what would happen. So I presented my first thing, and they said, we love it. Do tons of different versions of this. You're like, but you love it. And you're like, yeah, but we don't know if we love it. And so, you know, there's much more than this. I didn't want to take you down the whole block, but they said, what if it's got green blood? What if it's on, like, what if it's like a Banksy? What if it's like, what if it looks like it's the Predator's vision? You know, like we tried all these different ways. And at the end of the day, it just came back to the first comp. You know, like, that's the funniest thing that happens sometimes is, sometimes it takes a million versions to get something, and sometimes your first one's the right one. But even if your first one's the right one, they won't pick that. The clients will not, they refuse. Mission Impossible that came out recently, we did all this stuff, most of the stuff for that. And the poster of him jumping over the logo was comp 1. By the time we finished that comp, it was comp 2,000 something. 2 years later, 3 years later, and we were really like, we could have just done this before. Like, it didn't really change at all. But that's the process that we go through, is that you give what you think is your best shot at something, and then you work back and forth with the client to try to get there. And sometimes you were right from the beginning, and sometimes it does take 2,000 posters to get to the point. And luckily they had no changes really, because honestly, if they had changes, I wouldn't have known how to do it. So it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, please don't make me do this in a different way or change stuff, because I honestly don't know if you ask me to do something, I don't know if I can do it. And luckily they just didn't ask for anything, and they were just like, yeah, like, go with that. They used it in a bunch of different ways, and I was stoked. I was like a kid who loved Predator, so it was like a fun thing to do when I was, you know, later. So then, next project I want to show you, there was a movie called Jingle Jangle, which was a children's Christmas movie. And they came to us and said, we want sort of like a big, fun, kind of metal extruded kind of thing, you know, like, and we want that, but not only do we want it as a print logo, we're going to want it as an animated logo. And nowadays, I would go to Mario and I would say, you're going to deal with the animation. I'm not going to deal with that. But back then, it was just me. So, so the first thing I had was like, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I sketched out kind of, you know, we try to always sketch out your ideas first, really roughly. It doesn't matter how bad an artist you are. Like, just get them on the page. Like, getting them out of your head onto a page, even if they're terrible, will help you. So I sketched out what I wanted to do. I was like, oh, kind of a rotated logo with gears and stuff. And then from there, at this point, I kind of know a little bit of what I was doing. I went and found a font I liked, and then I wrote, you know, I took it into Illustrator, and I kind of got the font into place design-wise, drew the little whoop-de-doos on the side, you know, kind of figured out, okay, this is my basic thing, and then went to, then started building it in Maya by just extruding paths, like taking one path and then saying that's one thing, and then widening it a little bit, extruding another, and just seeing if I like that. And then, you know, putting some gears, just kind of moving stuff randomly around and seeing if that works. So then we went through a bunch of different versions. Again, we did maybe 50 or 60 different logos. This one survived, and the client just wants to take it around with color and different placements of gears, those kinds of things. And then we get to a final logo. So now we get to a final logo, and they say, okay, this is going to be animated, so what do you do? And so the first thing we did was I sat down and decided like what I imagine out of this thing. And I'd like to say that I thought of this stuff beforehand, because you're supposed to tell people that. You're supposed to tell people that you had the idea and you're like, yeah, and I naturally figured it out and I knew all along. But in my case, I had just sort of made something and I walked backwards into it. And often that's the case. It's like you get something and then you go, oh yeah, well there's a bunch of gears. Maybe we go inside this thing and we pull out of the gears. And it's like, it just made sense naturally. So I proposed this thing. I made a storyboard here of flying backwards through the gears as the letters turn and do that. And then started building this thing, and I realized that's a lot of gears. And going, man, do I really have to build all those gears, and do they all have to do something? So I started going, this is insane. Like, this will take me weeks to just manufacture this whole thing. So I started going, okay, if I can make the camera in a place where I don't have to see the other letters, like they'll turn before I see them moving around to the gears inside them, I don't have to animate those gears. So like, wherever you can take a shortcut, take the shortcut. Don't feel bad about taking shortcuts, because again, time is our enemy, right? Like, we're constantly up against demands that are just way too fast. Like, I really feel like these three guys up here, and Mario as well, we can pretty much do anything we see, we just don't have the time for it. That's always sort of the problem, you know? And that will be your problem. You'll get to that point where you're like, I've learned enough 3D stuff. I can do a lot of things. But when you get into a job, they're like, do it by Tuesday. And you're like, it's Monday. And you're like, and so you start subtracting things, and you start going, oh, I don't need the gears everywhere because I don't need to animate everything, because if I could just turn the letters fast enough, no one will ever see them. You know, and then I can put the camera where I want, so that I don't need to, I could just, and then focus my attention on what the camera sees. And, you know, granted, like, if the client changes their mind and they want to do something else, then you have to figure it out at that point. But you're just kind of hoping a prayer that they don't say that. And then once I get that, what I started doing, when I kind of figured out here, was that, you know, again, like my original process of Predator, since I didn't know how to get the render to look good out of Maya, I started to develop this process of just rendering lots of different passes and making the most flexible files that I could, knowing that in compositing, you have a lot of room, but you have to give yourself that room. If things are too dark or bright or contrasty, you kind of like narrow down your options. But if you give yourself something that has the right lighting, but it's kind of like flat almost, you can move that either way. You're like, oh, I can make that darker, or I can make that brighter, or I can make that different colors. Or it's like, you want to give yourself that flexibility. Like, sometimes if I like a bump map, but maybe it's too strong, like, I'll render it a couple different ways and then decide what I like. I don't know what I'm going to use later. So out of Maya, we start, I render like a Z-depth pass, and I render an ambient occlusion, and a bunch of different object ID passes, because I'm like, I might want to select certain things and just mess with those little things. So I try to give myself as much room when I'm doing this as possible. And then I also built, in particular, in After Effects, a little kind of whoop-de-doo to go around and make this thing all look pretty. And this project was one of those things where it took like, I didn't know how to light this thing, because I'm like, you're inside of a little area. So it's got a million lights. I'm sure there's a better way of doing that, but there's like 200 lights on this thing, which is bananas. And my computers couldn't render it, so we had to figure out putting in a render farm and do that, and like, because we just didn't have the computers to even get it out. I'm sure if I had done things correctly, it would have totally rendered fine, but I didn't know how. And so this is a still image of what the final product sort of looks like once you get all the little pieces in there and the lighting reflections and all this stuff. Let's see if this will just play. You know, so smoke and mirrors. Like, I know all the things that I cut corners. I know all the places that I did shortcuts, but you probably don't. Like, and it goes by quick, and you kind of blur things, you do things, you find ways. So you don't have to, as you guys are making stuff, just know, like, all that matters is the final product. All that matters is the thing you show people. Like, how it gets done, yeah, you want to make it good, and Gregory will probably go against me about this because his files actually have to be a little bit better built than mine, because with print stuff, I get away with a lot. And you know, when you get into video games, you get into like productions that you do have to be a little bit more mindful of it. But at the end of the day, like, stuff is still a little wonky behind the curtain. You know, we were talking the other day of like, there's a video, like Call of Duty or something, and they had to get a shadow from the character, and they couldn't because there was no head, so they just put like a big neck on a head, and you don't see that, but like they pulled the camera back, and the soldier has like a 10-foot neck. And it was for some reason the only way they could get the shadow to work. And you're like, cool, no one ever saw that. You know, it was nice of them to show us behind the curtain to show just how wonky a video game can be. But that's just how it goes. So that's a very complicated setup. That last one, the last few things were all complicated things. I wanted to show you something that just went so simply, it was like the greatest thing. So we worked on this movie called Knives Out 2, and someone came to me and said, I have these shots, and I want them to be reflected in glass. Can you do that? And me and Hong looked at each other and we're like, do you know how to do that? I'm like, no. Do you? I'm like, no. I'm like, what? Okay, we'll figure it out. Well, you know, so it was one of those things like, oh, we were like kind of scared. We're like, how do you reflect? Do we have to like map this onto the glass? Do we have to like create this whole thing? And then we just goes, well, what if you just put it in front of the poster? And it worked. And it was like, just magically worked and looked good. And it was like, it took us like 30 minutes to figure it out. The renders took like 10 minutes, and it just looked good, and we were like, cool. And so we made the entire set for the Harry character series. And it's one of those things I'm like, honestly, that was one of the best looking things I've done in 3D in a long time, and it was so easy that it just, you know, it surprised me how easy something like this could be sometimes. So it doesn't always have to be a grind. It doesn't always have to be like the hardest thing you've ever done, or like, you know, it's like sometimes 3D stuff is easy. Sometimes, like, honestly, I try to tell art directors this all the time. You could learn Cinema 4D just to make logos. It's not that hard. You get an Illustrator file, you extrude the bevels, and you put some metal textures on it, and you're good to go. Like, not everything has to be a struggle, because so much of 3D is a struggle. And I personally love that struggle, but sometimes it's very nice when things just like work out, you know. And then I would like to introduce Hong.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Hong, and I'm a 3D journalist and motion designer and concept arts. And I graduated from Oldys, and when I was at Oldys, I was focused on the concept design. And pretty much the last year, I switched to the ZBrush stuff, and I built my portfolio in 3D. That's how I got a job after school and farm. And from where I work on the title sequence, all that kind of stuff, you know, 3D and design, After Effects, and then I ended up here in concept, meaning just dealing with all the 3D stuff. And next slide. Yeah, for the hero stuff, it was a challenge at the beginning, and because you have to imagine while you're at a school, you can do whatever you wanted to do, right? You just have to make things pretty, that's it. But once you got a job, you know, the assets you got from the clients, most of the time is not what you wanted, you know. So, next slide. And for this one, sometimes you're gonna receive the art directions from the art directors, like the poses stuff and lighting things, and then you have to figure it out how to make it prettier and in 3D. And one thing you have to do is that if you just follow exactly what they show you, it might end up look stiff, right? So most of the time I did is like I just look into the mirror and maybe act it out myself to see, is this pose look cool enough, or I have to adjust it a little bit before I show it to somebody else, you know? So that's the things I did all the time for everything I'm doing. Next slide. And here, probably I'm gonna show you another trick I did, because we talk about the try and error thing. I think Curtis talk about that a lot. That's the project I got. It's driving me nuts. So like the assets I talked about before, most of the assets you got from the clients is not what you wanted. This is perfect example. You can look at the wireframe, so dense. So once you import it into Cinema 4D, you can barely move the camera around, So if you are rendering it out something, you couldn't even do that, So you had to figure out a way, how am I gonna solve the problem? And I'm not a rigger at that time. I did not even know how to do the rigging, that type of thing in Cinema 4D. But I have to figure out a way to solve the problem in order to show my creative directors or whatever, or the clients. I cannot just tell them, oh, sorry, I don't know how to do it, Then you have to learn it on yourself. And this time I did not know how to rig it stuff, but I use Morph in Cinema 4D. I'm not sure if you guys use the Cinema 4D or not, but there's a thing, you can use the Morph target. You can put it on the high poly, and it's still working till now. If you use Cinema 4D 2023, it's still working. I tested it the other days. So you put the morph target on the high poly, and you can choose whether use the low poly to control the position or rotation or even scale. So you can put the access into the bones you want to control. And one thing you have to keep in mind, you have to zero out everything on both models. In that way, I can only create the cubes to wrap it up the high poly. I don't have to do rigging at all. And then I can just control the low poly, and the low poly is gonna control the high poly. So then you can move around. Next slide. So that's how I create those poses. Those poses like this, I use exactly the same technique I did before. No rigging, just the low poly to control the high poly. Because you cannot even control the high poly when it's on. So you have to turn the high poly off and make sure the low poly looks great. And then you can turn the low poly off, get the high poly on, just rendering. So that's the trick I did back then. I didn't even know that time. But after that, I learned how to rig in that kind of stuff. But still, so if you got a high poly like that, you cannot even rig it, So it's impossible. You have to lower it down and even retop or whatever. So I think this is a pretty good technique you can use for some project like this, but it's not gonna happen all the time, but just once for a while. Next slide. And another problem is like for the shading, like Curtis talked about before, it's like you have to figure out the material stuff, Most of the time you got, not most of it, sometimes you got the project from the clients, you are missing textures. They just give you the default colors, as I said. Like you cannot even use it like that, it's awful. Just like on that side, you can just nothing on there. But you have to figure out how am I gonna be able to improve the look to match up their qualities in their game. And so, do I have the time to do everything, UV, unwrap everything, and bring to Sapiens Painter, paint everything? Because I know how to do that, but it's gonna take me a lot of time on it, right? So, I don't have the time to do all those things. So I have to build up the shaders in a way I can save it. Whenever I need it, I can pull it out. It's gonna save me time. So in Cinema 4D, I build up a lot of material system for myself, like scratch, like metal, rusty, everything. I have my own library. If you guys are using that, you should create your own library as well. So whenever you need it, you can pull it off pretty fast. Like here, just mix different material together. I'm a Redshift user. I know Gregory uses Acton. So no matter what I'm using, it's pretty much a similar process, Build up your material library on your own. Whenever you need it, you can pull it off pretty fast. Next slide. And this is pretty much the final version of the Halo Infinity, that poster we did. There's some variations of the different poses. And same, you can see how I improved the quality of the look based on the file I got it from the clients, just base color, nothing in there. But you have to improve the look to try and error everything, play around. And curvature node, everything to figure out how I'm gonna improve. And also, finding the right reference is really important, So find the reference can help you a long way. You don't want to sit there and imagine things. You want to compare to the real reference, and then you can improve the look based on that. I think for that one, we did that poster, and then we did a little bit animation stuff. I think Curtis can talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, and just to reiterate about what Hong was saying is when we get these things from the client, it's generally just the geometry. And we have to, and it's because they're doing proprietary stuff in the games themselves. They don't want to hand these things to people like, to outside companies. So we have to rig it, do the shading, many times texture it, figure out the lighting, do the pose. So it's like, we're given the model a lot of times for these games, but that's about it, just the base model, and we have to kind of figure it out. So it's like, we don't have a big team of dedicated people to be like, you spend a week doing the shaders. It's like, you got 6 hours, figure it out, because you're gonna have to do the whole thing. So then what we do is we take those renders and we try to marry it with photography, because the easiest, it's pretty tough to do an entire scene entirely in 3D and make it look photoreal. So we try to kind of limit the number of assets that we're using in something like this that are game stuff. And so a lot of this is stuff that, like, I didn't personally do the art on this one, but like a lot of this stuff is stuff they went outside and just took pictures of trees and just tried to get it in the same lighting, and and then a combination of stock. There's probably like 150 different little pieces of photography in there, and then just painting them all little things by hand, and and then you try to marry all the lighting together, and you try to an atmosphere and get it to feel like one cohesive piece of art. So then after that point, they generally would hand it back to me and say, okay, we have this piece of art, you got to animate that. And we also had another few pieces of art, and I'll show you a simpler one. We did a few of these things where we had the finished piece of art, but we had to animate them. Let's see if I can make that work. And so they didn't want like huge animations. They just wanted these things to come to life so they look kind of fun on a website or something like that. And so we have, it was about kind of, I'll go through this in a sec, but like finding the little bits of things that you could move without, you can't really move Master Chief because it would take too much rendering. We can't go back and do all that stuff. We just needed to bring these things to life a little bit. So what you do in these instances is you find things that can sort of animate besides him, like things that are atmospheric, things that are like smoke and debris, fire, little light glints, little things happening where you can create this stuff in like After Effects and lay it over and create kind of a living motion thing. We're not trying to do a full-on animation. We're just trying to make something that feels alive. So when you see motion posters now, it's like generally you have a flat piece of art. You have to go through, or you have a layered piece of art and you have to go through, flatten that all into little tiny pieces. And then you go through and you just try to find those little moments of things that you can realistically make animated without feeling cheesy. Because this stuff gets cheesy really fast. Like if you try to move his arm like this, it's gonna look real dumb, because when we move our arms, we don't just go like this with a gun. Our shoulders move, our legs plant differently, our hips move, all these things move when we do things, and if you just move the arm, it looks like a cartoon from the 50s. It's like a old-timey little animation. So you try to find things that you could believably animate and make and bring to life. And so like this, like light is one, so we have a lot of light wrapping around, we have a lot of debris going on, and you composite these things together and make it the final thing. Same deal, finding little things, little debris. And I will say that like what Hong didn't mention is that the art director who worked on this with him was painstaking about posing. It's like getting a model posed is not that hard, but getting it to feel lifelike is extremely difficult. And it goes back to like, I know you guys have fundamental classes here. take all those classes. They're probably required, but like take them twice. You will use that more than any Maya class in your whole life. Like being able to understand like how the body moves and how it reacts to light and what, when you plant your foot, how the rest of your body kind of reacts to that motion. That's what comes across in an image when you pose it to make a great image. All those little things add up to a very emotional piece of art. Whereas if you just move things stiffly, you can see it. You can feel that there's no life in it. And so all that life comes from little tiny movements that happen in our bodies. But like, it takes years to like learn those little things that, or just observation, It's like he was saying we look at each other, he looks at himself in the mirror. We often are on Zoom with each other and just posing for each other, and going like, no, it's more like this, and it's like, oh, okay, it's like that. And it's because until you look at it in real life, it's very difficult to figure out those things. Even now, after like, decades of doing this, I still have to look at reference or real people, or ask my wife to walk in the room and ask her to do something so I know, oh, that's what happens when you like, when you turn your head. It's like your clavicle goes with you. And oh, so does all this. And like, these all things are all depending on each other. So when you're animating for anything you're doing with a real character, anything like that, don't discount how many little things are reacted to each movement. And so going back to like taking the fundamentals of class, learning how to draw, figure drawing is like, to me, the best thing you could possibly do. So I'll take this back to home.
Yeah, I just want to add on that a little bit. So like, I think the fundamental is the key. Even though I'm a 3D artist, I draw all the time, So the only thing I practice till now every day, every morning I draw pretty much an hour or so, just practice the figure drawing, whatever. So whenever I need it, I can get there. I don't want to stuck in 3D forever. I don't know how to draw, So know the tools about the 2D and then apply that into 3D so you can expand that from there. So next. So the next one, ideas like way back for the Jurassic logo. For this project, I think I want to talk about the first is how you're going to find the right reference for yourself. So finding the reference is really, really important for you, At least for me, I say. It's like if I have a week working on a project, I pretty much spend a day or so to finding the right reference and then sketch out the rough sketches based on that. But it's kind of tricky while I was at school. So like how much time should you focus on finding the right reference for you? And if you spend too much time, it's kind of wasted. If you spend not enough time, you don't have enough reference for you to pull it off, So that's the thing, you have to figure it out on your own. You do not want to spend too much time to find something you are not going to use it at the end. So in order to do that, you have to organize your thought at the beginning stage. So for me, I use Pure Riff. So you can organize each into different sections. I'm not sure if you guys use that program, you can download it. It's on Google, it's free. So you can put different images into different programs and then you can organize it in there. So organize your thoughts is really important. You don't want to go anywhere. And that's, oh, hold on, can we go back a little quick? So that's the really beginning, the thoughts I have. So like, I want to do maybe X particles fully stuff, I just drew it out right there. And then next one, maybe I want to add a smoke, explosion stuff for the logo. And the last one, maybe it's like add some cracks, whatever, or maybe stone. And that's all the crazy thoughts I had at the beginning of the stage. So go next one. So from that, once you got all the ideas out, and one thing you have to remember, you don't want to constrain your thoughts at the beginning stage. You just want to let it out first, Don't judge at the beginning stage. Let everything out. Once everything out, you can go back to analyze everything. Do I really need that? Or I can polish this, So from there, you can think about how I'm going to bring the 2D concept I had and bring it to the 3D stage. And remember, all those drawings, you are not going to show anybody. You're going to keep it for yourself. You don't have to draw it out. You can write it down. Just keep it for yourself. And for there, at the very beginning, I just create different shaders in Cinema 4D, and of course, Redshift. And I have different ones, and each one has slightly different variations, like different scratches, whatever, I added there to test out the refraction everything. And soon I realized, that might not be enough because the clients wanted something to fully destroy the surface. So if I do that, or maybe I can add displacement map instead of 4D, I can do that way, but I have less control myself, right? So I want to fully control the model, how I build it. If the client doesn't want it, then I can go back to fix it. That's how I brought the things into ZBrush. I mean, ZBrush is everything. If you use ZBrush, it pretty much can do anything. And for this case, I use ZBrush for the logo. So one thing you have to remember, while I was at school, I did not pay any attention. I just sculpt whatever I wanted to sculpt, I bake everything. That's good for you. But once you work with the clients, that's not good, You have to keep the layers on all the time. Layers is your friend. I'm sure if you use ZBrush, you have to, because the clients might give you the feedback the next day. Oh, I don't want this. You have to change the direction from the scratch. If you bake everything, it's good, So always keep the layers on. If the client's done like this, you can turn it off, move on. You don't have to resculpt everything from the scratch. So that's for that. And also, that one I included right there is for the lighting. The lighting is pretty simple. I have two softbox on each side, but I want to create the point light behind it because I want a really high point light behind it to have a focal point from the logo. The struggle I had at that time is like, if I put the light far away, it's going to diffuse the light a little bit. So it's softer, but I lose the focal point a little bit. And I also can reduce down the value of the light. But in that way, I don't have to move the light at all. But it's still not the look I wanted. And the trick right here I did is like, I duplicate the logo, because the logo is pretty thin. The light's gonna travel through the glass super fast. You're gonna see through the refractions pretty clear. I do not want that. I want color variations between once the light goes through the glass. So I duplicate the object. I extrude it out, make it super thick, and put behind of the real object. I turn off the visibilities and only use that to block the light, So that way I can keep it super soft, and then I don't have to move the light at all. And then we can go to the next slide to show you. So that's the thing I talked about in the beginning, and that's the process how I got it. So that's I was trying some simulation, smoke, fire stuff, show the clients. They said, oh, I like that kind of idea, but I do not want to go to that kind of direction. They want an amber in it. So that's how we switched the direction. So then we made a 3D. They even printed out the 3D logo, I did it. And then we're trying to pour some liquid on top of it to match the concept I did at the first stage, right? This is like, yeah, that's cool, but I don't like the look at all. Maybe we should make the whole materials like amber somehow. That's how I move back to 3D Cinema 4D to play around the shader I made before, So that's how things got involved through that. And that one is a little bit clean, that, like I said, but the client said that's kind of the right direction, so we should go for it. But the logo looks super clean, and that's how I ended up using ZBrush to, I have a fully control to add the cracks after that. And that's kind of that's the lower one, just the color shifting between each one is tiny different color twigs from there, but like you can see the light is super soft, but you still can see the focal point at the center of that light because I have the object behind it to block the light. So that's kind of the trick I had over there. Otherwise, you're gonna see the light travel through the glass super clearly. So in this way, the light can only happen in the way I want it to happen in the center. So you can create a focal point right there. That's the thing. Even for a logo, you have to think about the focal point, everything, even about the composition, whatever, So designs can apply for everything, even from a logo, concept art, whatever. So it's all connected. So yeah, that's pretty much for that. And the next slide is gonna be show you guys the final ones the client picked. So we did someone with the title on it, and another one they wanted us to take that out and then just create a simple one version. So that's the logo we had. Yeah, that's it.
And then Gregory.
That's awesome. Yeah, hey, super cool. Hey guys, my name is Gregory. I am the Senior Art Director of AV Motion Graphics at Concept Arts. I have worked at a lot of different shops. The previous shop I was at was Hulu. So a lot of the work that I'm going to be showing you guys today is from Hulu, and that's only because I haven't been with Concept Arts for long enough to have a large body of work to share with you guys, but you know, keep an eye out for that in the next few months. The only other thing I want to tell you guys is that I'm super honored to be here today. I've never done anything like this, so it's very humbling to be in front of you. The things that I sort of want to share with you are, you know, things that I wish somebody had told me, you know, when I was first starting out, things that, you know, maybe, you know, if somebody senior had said, you know, these are the tips and the tricks that will help you along your career path, I think that's like probably the most useful kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go over a few different things. One of the things that I want to share is good design goes beyond what you see, and that, you know, I know he's sort of talking a lot about, you know, just the final product is what, you know, you see, and that's all, the only thing that matters. And yes, that is very true. You know, make the client happy, do what you need to do to get it done. But for what we're doing in motion graphics, like in AV especially, a lot of this stuff needs to sort of be templatized so that clients can give you notes on things and you can make changes quickly, and that's really important. And part of sort of what it comes down to is, like, I brought these AirPods so I could share this with you guys. I mean, I'm sure you guys have AirPods and have seen this before, but essentially, like, what this means to me is, like, this little thing is super cool, works great, it sounds great, I use these all the time. The thing I love about this is that I don't have to worry about this. Like, this is good design under the hood and, you know, visually. I pop these in here, there's a magnet in it, it grabs it, drops it down, holds it in place. I can throw these in my bag, the things are not banging against each other. I know they're gonna be safe, you know, if I, you know, go on a flight and it's checked or whatever. But these this is a different thing, you know what I mean? Like, these are super cool, these sound great too, I love these, but this is not the best design, you know. I'm worried about this, I have to think about this, you know what I mean? And so, like, this is where good design, you know, meets, you know, sort of poor engineering for this kind of stuff. So, you know, I think one thing to keep in mind is that when you're designing something, like, you shouldn't have to sacrifice function for fashion. I think that's, like, really important. And realistically, it takes a little bit of forethought while you're building something, you know what I mean? And there's something to building, you know, your style frames and your mood boards and being messy in the beginning. And I'm not just talking about sort of organization in your project, but, like, creating a project file that you can share with your friends, colleagues, classmates, and knowing that they could go in there, change things around easily, and not be ultimately, like, confused by what's happening. I think that's really important. So, you know, it's important to design your files to be able to make changes. If you want to pop to the next slide. One thing I wanted to share with you guys is welcome to Chippendales. This is something that I worked on at Hulu with Mario, and if you want to pop to one more slide down, these are, you know, style frames. I want to share this with you guys because, like, this is the process that it took to, like, ultimately end up where we ended up, which is completely different. But I mean, this is sort of the road that it takes. You know, sometimes you're creating a lot of different things that visually, you know, look beautiful, and you fall in love with them, and you're really, you know, enthusiastic about it. But the things that you love are not necessarily the things that, you know, the client is ultimately going to love. or maybe they do, and maybe they're just not going to love them for the project. You know what I mean? We're in this marketing world where, you know, this idea about what sells people on stuff is sort of subjective, and so everybody has an opinion about it. So one thing to sort of keep in mind is that, you know, maybe in your head, like, this thing is maybe cooler than what ends up finishing, but, you know, just don't be discouraged by that stuff. You know, the work is still the work, and it's still valuable if you care about it. So if you want to pop to the next slide. So this is the main title that ended up sort of finishing first, and I made this after having made several iterations of it, several iterations of those, you know, other style frames that you guys saw on the last page. Like, that was just a fraction of what we actually sent to the client, what we showed. But ultimately, this is where we end up, this concept of being on something that has like a black silky background and has like these spotlights moving across, and you know, obviously the bow tie, because this ties into Welcome to Chippendales. So you know, this is obviously a departure from the style frames, but it's important to keep in mind, you know, these things, like where simplified comes in, like, doesn't mean it doesn't look good still. You know what I mean? Simple can still be, you know, beautiful. So if you want to pop to the next slide, please. So here, I don't know if you guys have seen Grandma's Boy. I'm sure some of you have. This is a movie I kind of grew up watching because I thought it was hilarious, and I like video games and stuff. But this is a gift from Grandma's Boy, and essentially this is sort of talking about building something in a way that is engineered to be changed. And so, like, this is a reference where he's essentially saying change the color rather than rebuilding an entirely new character. This right next to it is one of the internal cards that I built for that look that you just saw for the main title. And the reason why I want to show you this is because while I'm building this 3D sort of silky background, I'm thinking in my head, like, well, we're going to have many interstitials for this this AV trailer, and I need to be able to have variation in my cards so that it's not boring over time, you know what I mean? And the best way for me to have variation is to have the spotlights coming from different places. And I don't want to render 10 different backgrounds out of 3D. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each 3D background be 2 cards. And basically the way that I did this was really simple. I just flipped the X scale inside of After Effects, and then, you know, one 3D render turns into 2 internal cards. So I did probably 3, you know, 3D renders, and that ends up being 6 internal cards easily. And now I have variations. So it's, you know, simple things like that, where, like, you're designing, you know, in the engineering process helps a lot. If you want to pop to the next slide. This is after we essentially presented the black look that went out to, you know, the first teaser, I think, that we showed out in the world. This is essentially, you know, the client telling us, let's keep going, let's simplify this a little bit more. I want to just do a white background, and I want this to be just the black bow tie. That way this really pops. Like, I don't want to see too much of the texture. Like, that's cool, but it's not really the most important thing. The important thing is that we get the bow tie, and there's a little blood dripping from the bow tie. So, like, this is sort of, you know, being able to shift directions easily, and knowing that I engineered this thing in a way that we could change this and effectively, you know, not essentially have to rebuild everything, but, you know, I could still use all of the camera animation that I did. I could still use all of the lighting that I did for the bow tie. I could still use the compositing of the blood drip that I made. like all of this stuff could be reused, and really the only thing that I need to do is like create a new white background, add a little bit of texture to it, you know, make sure the lighting is not too hot on that particular background, so sort of isolate my lights between what's happening on my bow tie and my background, and then, you know, boom, I have a new completely different main title for this. So that's where this guy landed. If you want to pop to the next one, please. So yeah, this brings me to the next topic I want to share. Unforeseen challenges. Like every project I've ever worked on has unforeseen challenges, and that's in lieu of basically being tenacious about planning, you know, thinking ahead, like what is this project going to entail once we get the breakdown and once we get the brief from the client, like what are the things that we'll be presented with. You know, we do a lot of homework, we do a lot of research, but no matter what, there's always going to be some sort of challenge, whether it's technical, you know, whether it's something to do with the live action that didn't work out properly for VFX, like something always happens that you just can't foresee, and it's about sort of rolling with the punches and like figuring this stuff out as you go. Like that's a big part of my job, is to be able to figure these things out. So I'm going to show you one thing where it took us a bit to figure some stuff out, and pop to the next one. So if you want to play the left one first. So that's the dancer that's actually up there dancing. Basically, this is a digital out-of-house campaign that we did for Welcome to Chippendales. I think it like recently won some like golden trailer award for best digital out-of-house or something. But like some of the challenges here were, if you want to play the next one so they can sort of see this is the render. I mean, we made several of these renders because there were several dancers, but essentially it became templatized to the point where we could just swap in dancers and send that to the vendor. But essentially some of the challenges we were presented with this project was receiving a file from the client. Just like Hong is saying, a lot of this stuff like doesn't always come in one-to-one the way you want it to. So the file that we actually received was from the vendor. So the vendor is the company that like puts up all of the digital advertising and digital out-of-house campaigns on those boards. I think they must own the billboard, the digital billboards there. But they hadn't actually done a 3D placement for these billboards before. They have experience doing these kinds of 3D placements, but they had never done it with these two boards before. So when I received the Alembic file, I popped this into Cinema 4D, and I'm just like, I look in the camera, and it's looking right up at this little corner unit, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I essentially need to build inside of this, you know, these two walls and these two ceilings here. You know, this is where I build my 3D. But the orientation and the position of everything and the scale of everything in the Alembic was completely wrong. You know, like the camera and the actual 3D environment are pushed way off into the scene, and they're not zeroed out in the zero axis. And when I got them finally zeroed out, they're like the scale is completely off, and like that causes, you know, problems that I'm sure you know if you've ever nested that and your camera, your 3D and your camera into a null and then try to scale the stuff up. It's not always just a simple thing, you know, to do that. So these are some of the things that, you know, are unforeseen, but you roll with it, you figure it out. So like after a little bit of R&D and talking to the client a little bit, trying things out, I think at the end of the day, like I essentially was like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna build something super, super low res, and I'm gonna send you essentially like a TIFF or a, you know, PNG, and you're gonna try to unwrap it and see if it's working. You know, let's test this thing. So that's what we did. You know, testing's really important for us. So that ultimately ended up working. The next thing that we're presented with was once we got the 3D file working, we're like, now we have this live action shoot where we need to shoot these dancers, in front of a green screen and essentially get them into this 3D environment after we build the 3D. But there's a fly, sorry. But essentially, basically, I'm sure you can tell on the left one, you're looking up at this giant 3D billboard, and the way the camera's oriented inside of the 3D file is much lower, and you have this super wide angle. You're looking up. Everything is huge. So to be able to really shoot this correctly, you would have to build a massive stage, right? And that is not realistic. There's no budget for that, there's no budget to be able to, there's no time to do that, so the way that we do this is we talk about well, what can we do? Can we build a small stage? Can we put them on Apple boxes? Is that possible? Can we do something to lift them off the ground? And basically the answer is no. No, we can't do that. The green screen stage is the green screen stage, and make it work, figure it out. So, me and my creative director, we talked about this a lot, and we're like, well, maybe what we do is we put the camera on the ground, right on the ground, and we tilt it up as much as possible, and then maybe we pull it really far back, and we use a really wide lens. Maybe that'll do it. So we tried it, and voila, it ended up working. So if you want to, I think, pop to the next one. Oh, actually, you know what? Go back. I'm sorry. I have one more point to talk about here. The last thing is, essentially sweetening this stuff up and just talking about some of the compositing. Some of the compositing here, presented a little bit of challenges, but I'm sure, as you guys know, you've probably had some green screen footage that wasn't always, friendly. Particularly, this is what happened with us for this one. It required more than just an easy key. It required a little bit of roto. It required, a little bit of cleanup. It required a lot of light wrapping. It required, a lot of environment, smoke. What can we cover up? How can we make this, feel like a sexy thing, but also still feel, like it's actually up there and you're looking at it. And, the last thing that we had to sort of do was figure out how we're going to basically make cloth really small and then really big really quickly, because those pants, I'm sure you could tell, are not actually his pants that he's filling the entire screen with. So essentially trying to create something that sort of forms the shape of his pants as he throws them at the camera, but then gets really big and takes over the entire screen so that we can transition into the main title. And that took a little bit of testing, but we're lucky to be able to pull it off, and we did. Sometimes this stuff is just luck, so we did it. If you want to pop to the next one. So the thing I want to talk about next is this desire to continue learning. This job, for me especially, requires a desire to continue learning. This industry is constantly changing. I'm sure you guys know that, with the oncoming of AI and the technology shifting, and whether you're using Houdini or Maya or whatever software, AI is coming, and we just have to shift. We got to figure it out, and we got to keep evolving and learning. And it's a really big part of sort of how I feel confident enough to be presented with jobs from clients and not having done exactly what they're asking for, but I know I can figure it out. So that learning process that I have on my own time at home, maybe I'm just laying in bed watching a video and I'm like, oh shit, that's a really cool, they figured something out in Octane that I didn't know about. That's really cool. That may not apply to what I'm building currently, in the office, but that may apply, 3 weeks from now, or, a month from now, or whatever. So it's just that continual learning process is super important. I just encourage you guys to keep that going, especially because you guys are going to be the next group championing these pipelines of AI. Like, you guys will be the ones who are sort of building new pipelines with how we interact with AI. You know, at this moment, I don't think, for me at least, like, I haven't been able to create something with Midjourney that works like exactly how I want it to work, you know, the first time. And so it takes a lot of back and forth, but it'll come, and you guys will probably be the ones to figure out how to make this work inside of a production pipeline. So the next thing I want to talk about is, if you want to pop to the next slide, is this is an example of sort of how I had to figure things out, you know, for something new that I hadn't done before. And this particular show is called Only Murders in the Building, and it's the after show for One Killer Question. I also worked on the title for Only Murders in the Building, but that project was so smooth that I just don't feel like I have enough, you know, learning experience to share with you guys about that. I feel like the struggles are more valuable for you than the just immediate successes. So I want to talk about this one in particular. This is not particularly creative. It's not crazy. It's not a crazy ask, but it's something that I had never done before. Essentially, what we're doing here is this left frame is a CG hallway, and the right frame is a reference photo from inside the building that they actually shot in. So that, coupled with, you know, some of the production shoot stuff from the Only Murders show, like, this was the ask. Like, we need to create a main title that feels like it's floating inside of this hallway. We travel through the hallway, we go through the door opens, and we travel into a live action set where we see the final main title. So if you want to play that play blast right there. So that's essentially just the play blast of, you know, the style frame above on the left, and that's kind of the first iteration of the left style frame. We did many iterations of that, but essentially the bottom one was valuable because prior to it landing on the final stage, which is where the main title was going to be floating, we had to create a camera speed and a camera height that would be efficient for an actual live action crew to sort of try to match on set. So it's like, this is something we gave them, and we're like, look, like, try to match this camera speed, try to match this camera height, try to match, I told them the camera focal length, I told them, you know, the height off the ground, and like, it's, you know, 5 feet, 6 feet off the ground, you know, match these settings, and then try to match the speed on a dolly so that this thing feels seamless and like a one-to-one. I want to pop to the next one. This is essentially the final product of where we ended up. And, you know, this was challenging for me because I've done a lot of CG stuff, but I've built realistic CG environments, and I've done things that look great, but I've never actually had to create something that was based off of something that actually exists, you know, in real life. I've never had to build an actual CG place that already exists, you know. So it's like, there's a fine balance between, like, I don't want to fuck this up, dude. like I gotta make it look real, you know, I gotta make it look good, and I also gotta make it look like the environment, because sometimes the real environments don't look so great, you know, they don't look so cinematic, they don't look so beautiful when you're actually trying to, like, sell a really cool, like, idea or concept for something like this. So, you know, what me and my creative director did is we built out that animatic, and then you know, this shoot was actually happening in New York, and we were not planning on flying to New York to VFX supervise. You know, it's another challenge. There was no VFX supervisor for this, so me and him were like, we're going to be the VFX supervisors. We're going to oversee this just for this particular one shot that we need. And we're going to make sure they have all the tracking markers on the ground. And we're going to make sure they have tracking markers in the back. Make sure that everything looks nice in the lighting. We're going to watch this through Zoom. We're going to have the animatic pulled up next to it so that we can make sure the speed is looking correct with with that sort of eyeballing the speed of our CG camera with the speed of their dolly, and I'm like thinking in the back of my head, if this guy fucks it up, like, how can I fix this? Maybe I can timer map this. Maybe I can Twixtor this, maybe I'm like thinking about these things as we go, because I'm like, we can't spend all day shooting just this one shot. But fortunately, like, we had an amazing, live action crew, and the guy got it pretty quick, so we were able to get that done. And then, it's a matter of compositing, painting these things out, on the ground, painting out the dolly, replacing the floorboards, getting rid of all the tracking markers in the back. There's a bunch of lights hanging down on the top of the scene. Got to paint that out, so it's like, all of this stuff ended up working out smoothly. And, I can honestly say that, prior to this project, I was getting a lot of questions like, are you sure you can do this? And in my head, I'm like, absolutely. And the reason I felt comfortable saying that is because, I do research on my own, and I keep my learning process going at home, and it makes me feel confident that I can figure these things out as we go, So, I encourage you guys to continue learning new things outside of school and outside of work, as you guys evolve. I want to pop to the next one. And the last thing I want to tell you guys is, this seems like a no-brainer, but sometimes people forget. But be positive, have a good attitude, be nice to each other. Like, we work, particularly us, in the advertising industry, it's stressful. Things can be intense, deadlines can be short, tempers can get short, but it's like, if you come in with positive energy and you're friendly to everybody and you're nice to everybody, that makes the job so much better. And it's just a pleasure to be around these guys, and I can honestly say I'm super grateful to have this team. So yeah, be excellent to each other. That's it from me.
Just a couple last thoughts, because I know we've been talking a while, but on that point, one of the big things that I would encourage you guys to do is learn how to talk to real, regular people about 3D. This seems like a stupid point, because you're in school and you're like, hey, we were talking about UVs earlier, and you're like, I've said this word to UVs to other people and try to explain it. They go like, what? What are you talking about? And those people are the people you are going to deal with every day when you actually start working. Most people don't know the terms, most people don't know what a bevel is or an extrusion is, all these little things, or what rigging means. I've explained rigging to people 10 times. It's like showing a dog a card trick. They look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, oh, so you got to paint the skin weights and you got to do a thing. And they're just like, what? Just make it look nice. Learn how to talk to regular people about what you do, and it will help your career. Because there's going to be people, even at the biggest games productions, even at the biggest movie productions, most of the people won't know what you do. They won't understand it. But they will ask you to do things, and you're going to go, I can't do that in that time, or whatever you're asking is ridiculous, and you have to explain that, why it's ridiculous. Or you have to tell them what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, or, you're going to have so much explanation to do it. And if you can be one of those people that learns how to bridge that gap between the average person who has no interest in learning any of this stuff to someone who's spent years diving into this stuff and thinks it's second nature, it will help you immensely. It's the weirdest thing, but it's very hard to get people to do that. The last thing I want to say before we do a Q&A is that there's the old adage, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Bullshit. Total, utter bullshit. Do what you love, and you will love the fact that you're working. This is work. We don't consider this look, if someone gave me a bunch, if I won the lottery, I'm not going to go to work. I'm still going to do work in Maya because I love it. I would still do it for myself, but I'm not going to do it for advertising, for sure. I might go try to make a movie or something. But like, if you love this stuff, you will love the grind of it, because it is going to be a grind at a certain point in your life. It won't always be a grind, but as you're learning this stuff, it's huge. Like, these programs are gigantic compared to, like, you talk to like a graphic designer and you're like, yeah, Photoshop, whatever. Just like, look at Houdini, and like, try to learn node system and all this stuff. And you're like, but if you love this stuff, you won't mind trying to figure it out. It will be fun. And you're like, and then when you get it done, you're like, I can't believe I figured that out. I remember when I first learned this stuff, I didn't have anyone to go to. And there'd be days where I'm just like, what is wrong with this thing? Why can't I figure it out? And then it was like a button, like a one little switch. After like 3 days of figuring something out, I finally pressed enough buttons that something did it. And it was so satisfying, because I was just like, that button, it made the render look right. And now I have people that we can bounce stuff off each other. We have people around that. But you guys have each other. You have teachers and stuff, which is fantastic. You can figure those things out. But, if you love this stuff, you won't mind how hard you have to work sometimes, because you will. This is not an easy thing that you guys have delved into here. So that's all to say that I think we all kind of love this stuff. We love what we do, and I actually enjoy doing it. But it's still work, and work is not fun, and clients are a pain, and that's just the sort of deal you make with, because
Agreed.
I also like living and eating. So, anyways, that's concept arts.
Hey. All right, cool. So now we're going to go on to the Q&A section. If anyone has a question, go ahead and put your hand up. Oh, awesome. And then if somebody's asking a question and you have a question, you can put your hand up and I'll put you in my mental queue. All right?
Get the cube. Cool. Okay. Wait, it's a microphone cube. That's so cool. Okay. Hi, my name is Celia. I am a generalist, and I am really interested in what this company is. I've always liked integrating VFX and particles and matte paintings together, like a true generalist would. So my question would be more so, if you're looking at a student's, a graduate's demo reel, right? Would you more so expect something where it's a VFX integration where they have footage of green screen, or maybe like creates an opening movie shot from scratch or something that's like reference to that? Or do you want to also see creativity in that reel? Like, would you rather see more skill in the product, or like it might not look the best, but like it's creative enough and it's something that we've never seen before, or like that's a good idea, that's a smart spin on whatever concept it is?
I'll take this because I look at a lot of portfolios. What I look for is, do you know what we do? You'd be surprised how many people send me portfolios that don't really have much to do with what we do, and I go, that's nice, but how does it, if I hired you, how would I know that you can do some of this stuff? Or how would I know that you're even interested in some of this stuff? Like, when I first applied to concept arts, it was because I had worked at a couple different shops, and then I went back into touring bands, and I had burnt out on doing touring bands, and I had decided I'm going to be a real human being again and get a job. And I was like, oh, but I haven't worked in years, really, except for I was doing like DVD covers for like the dollar bin DVD covers. And so I couldn't really show that. And I was like, but that's what my work is. And I was like, but there's this company, Concept Arts. I'm like, so I just built fake movie posters in sort of the style that they had done stuff. I picked things that were similar from I picked like old movies, and I just found photography, and I just made like 5 or 6 fake posters. And I just said, like, look, I don't have any like professional work that's really up to par with what you guys are doing, but here's stuff that's aligned with what you guys do. And I wish more people would do that, because I'm like, I don't really care that you did something for yourself. Like, just know that it applies to what we do. Because I'm not a mind reader. I can't tell. If you show me just something that's just typography and it's like a cool design exercise or something, I'm like, that's cool, but we do a lot of character work. And I'm like, can you do that? Do you want to do that? So it's less to me about, it's hard to say whether like it should be more creative or more technical. That kind of depends on what you want what you're looking for, and it also depends on the company you're going towards. But I would just say, look at the company you're applying to and think, what's something I can show them that is kind of like what they do? And if I don't have that, let me spend a week or two making one. And so I can show them, hey, here's some student work, here's some other stuff, but here's something I made just for you guys. And that initiative will also carry you way farther, because the company will be like, oh, well, like, this person cares. Like, this isn't just some cold email. This person wants to work here. And I'm telling you, like, just initiative and like drive is so much more attractive than talent. Talent isn't that special. Like, I don't care if someone is really that talented or really knows the programs that well. I care that they're going to be there every day on time and be willing to be like, yeah, I'll figure it out. Because talent only takes you so far, but initiative and just like the willingness to just be like, I love this stuff. I want to show you how hard I can work for you and get all this stuff done, will sell you as a person to them, not just as like a designer.
And one thing I want to add upon that is like, when you're a student, you have to think about what your passions are, right? You have to figure out, you do not want to stick into the tracks like, oh, I have to figure out the technique for all that, Of course, you're going to spend a lot of time to figure out how I'm going to do that kind of stuff. One way is like you can pull out the things you like, compare your work to others, What's the thing I'm a lack of, You can improve on that. Because there's two things you have to improve throughout your career. One is the technical side. The programs you have to master, Cinema 4D, Blender, whatever, you have to master that first. And then the creative side, what's in you? What do you want to see? So you have to express yourself either through 2D drawing or 3D animation, whatever. You have to express yourself in a way people can tell, oh, you like this. And then if the people like the things you like, then you link together. You do not want to do something, oh, maybe people will like this, I'm going to do that, Follow your own passion to do the things you like first. Please yourself first. Then you are going to go somewhere. That's the advice I would give.
Awesome. So another question we have is, so you were talking about having to work through, sometimes companies, they don't give you proper assets, or there's things that there are hurdles, right, that you have to go through. Amongst a lot of hurdles that artists obviously run into is just some days you wake up and you're not feeling it, right? And you were just talking about having to have that drive. What is a technique that each one of you use on your days that you're just feeling like, man, today's not the day, but you have to produce that drive? What's something that you do to make sure that you're still giving 100% even though you don't really feel 100%?
That's a good question.
I have an answer for that. So I think this is probably different for everybody, but it has nothing to do with design or animation or VFX or CG at all. I'll go for a run. Honestly, going for a run. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I just have a killer headache, and I'm just like, oh fuck, I gotta figure out this thing that I've been trying to figure out for 3 days. I'm sick of trying to figure it out. I don't want to deal with it anymore. Like, go for a run. That just makes like the headache go away, calms me down, makes me feel like, okay, like I could do that. I could probably, take this next challenge to the next level. That's what I do. I don't know what you do.
Yeah, I think everybody's a little bit different. I mean, for me, I really have that kind of problem for me because, you have to figure out, like, that's a job, you have to do it no matter if you like it or not, If you're on that task, you have to get it done, That's the mindset, You cannot say that I don't like it, I don't want to do it. You have to do it because you agree to do it. So one trick for that is like always go out of your comfort zone. So that's exactly happened to me before because I was focusing on the concept design. And by that time, I wasn't good at drawing stuff. I practicing drawing pretty much every single day. And then I learned ZBrush. I'm not good at ZBrush at all, but I can use the drawing skills I learned before, apply them to ZBrush stuff. And then after I graduated from college, I have to learn Cinema 4D. I did not know Cinema 4D at all. And then I have to go back, learn from the beginning. During that time, it was a struggle. I hate it. But when I looking back, all those things helped me to become who I am today. I can learn those programs. I can know, maybe ZBrush can help me to add the details faster. So the thing I always say is like, always go out of your comfort zone. Don't afraid about anything if you don't know anything about it. Try it first, give a shot, and then you're gonna figure it out whether you like it or not later. So yeah.
Have you guys heard of coffee? Because it's amazing. Besides a lot of coffee, we work at a relatively small agency compared to a lot of big, giant parts of the entertainment industry. And I think we have a team that all really kind of relies on each other. And I personally know that none of us want to let each other down. And we work, a lot of the things that we build, we're building for art directors who have had this idea and they want us to help them doing stuff, and we're collaborating with other people, and it's like, you kind of feel, it's not pressure, it's just that you feel like they're working hard and you don't want to slack. Like, we really have this weird thing at our company where I don't know anyone that slacks, because everyone looks at each other going, that guy's working hard, and I respect him, and I feel like he's or she is doing a great job and is showing up, and they need something from me, so I'm going to give it I'm going to give my best here. And I think, people burn out all the time. That is a constant problem in our industry because the demands are just time-based all the time. It's just, after this project, we have to go render a bunch of stuff after we do this. Because I need renders for the morning to give to the art directors so that they can finish building their comps for 5 p.m. delivery. And so that's what we're going to do after this. It's, I'm going to still, go home and have dinner and have a nice night, but we still have to go finish off those renders. So you do hit a point of burnout no matter what. I don't care who you are. And like Hong said, finding those new avenues to give you new life into the stuff is really helpful. If you're just sick of what you're doing and you're just like doing something else, learning a new skill really helps. Gregory is saying, do something else. Go outside, get away from the computer. Don't just play video games. The worst thing you can do after you work on a computer all day is go play video games, because you could just sit, and trust me, I've done it. Back in the day of Final Fantasy, I got to the end and it showed me how many hours I wasted on that game, and I was like, I can't do that ever again. And it's so valuable just to go outside and do something completely opposite of computer work. Because you have to reset your brain. If you just sit there in front of it and just try to grind through sometimes, you'll hate life.
One thing I do every Sunday is me and my partner go for hikes, which is it's changed how we sort of start the week off. You know what I mean? A little bit of nature, a little bit of sun makes all the difference in the world. Yeah.
I personally go boxing on Sunday mornings and I get punched in the face, but it's the same thing.
That explains so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I've been in cinematography for 30 years on set. And, a lot of times we have clients or directors who really don't know what they want. They know they don't like what you're offering them. But at the end of the day, at the end of our 12-hour shoot day, we have to get it in the can and move on. We can't just come back day after day after day and keep trying different stuff. You guys mentioned something earlier that your clients will often come back for 2,000 revisions. How do you price that out? Like, you can't just keep going on for months and months. Like, it's got to start jamming up into your other clients' needs and, you know, your time. Like,
Oh,
how do you-
yes.
yeah, so you have to have some system for pricing that out. Does that go into, like, your contract when you start a job? It must be, right?
Yeah, there's various ways that shakes out. I think I'm probably not the best person to actually give you these answers, but there's different ways where with certain companies we have an all-in kind of thing, and that's great in some respects because, you know, if you finish early, that's great. But they can also beat you up for a long time if that's the case, and they don't have to keep paying, and that also gives them license to just keep asking for stuff, right? So there's pros to that and there's cons to that. There's other companies that we just have like a first round, and if they like that, we negotiate the next ones, the next ones. There's other ones we have like, you get 3 rounds and you get this amount of revisions, and you do this, and then after that, the revisions, you pay for revision rounds, and then we have a process of like finishing where that becomes another thing too, and if it goes to animation, those kinds of things. So honestly, there isn't one way that these things go. It kind of depends. To be honest, it's a little bit dictated by the client and how they work. Like if Paramount works this way and they want to approach us this way, that we decide if we want to do it or not. You know, rather than us saying like, here's how we want to work, you sort of have to react to the project and to the client's wishes in a certain sense. And, you know, there's a lot of competition, so you know, budgets get cut where they can because, you know, money becomes a big factor of this stuff.
You're in a particularly difficult field too, where you're actually, you know, having to be on your feet, running around, standing, potentially in hot environments all day long, 12, 14 hours a day. It's a challenging job. So like, you know, every client is different. Some clients are buttery smooth and super sweet and you love working with them. Some clients are not like that. You know, some clients are, you know, I need this at X hour, and if you miss that, we're not paying, you know what I mean? So it's a sort of understanding people and understanding, you know, what you're able to, like, you know, get through with each of your clients. And, you know, I would say sometimes maybe if they're putting you through the ringer and they're not willing to pay you for, you know, X amount of overtime, maybe it's not worth, you know, doing it, you know.
Yeah, and one of the biggest struggles I'll say as you guys go out into the world of doing this stuff, I mean, you've been in it 30 years, so it's a different perspective, but one of the hardest things to do is find your value and give people prices. It's very, you know, it sounds easy to just be like, I think that's going to cost $2,000. You should give me $2,000. It's the one thing I hear from younger people all the time is like, how much should I charge? What am I worth here? And that's honestly a very hard question, but know that, like, you know, go higher and be flexible, you know, but don't undervalue yourself, because undervaluing yourself will actually make you look weaker in their eyes. So like being on you don't want to be too expensive, but be confident and be a little tiny bit expensive so they look at you and go, I think that person must know what they're doing. Because like when you take your car to the mechanic, how do you know that mechanic's good? Mm-hmm. I don't, but I know if I pay him a lot, I expect him to be good. Mm-hmm. And like people don't know how to value these kind of things. It's very difficult, you know, because it's just your time, right? And you're like, what is my time actually worth? And so, but know that like you can be confident in that. You can walk up to somebody and say, like, if someone asks you to do something, don't lowball them, because you think, oh, if I lowball them, that'll help me get the job. What it'll actually do, it will get you the job, but then you'll feel terrible about the amount of money you're making. You'll be miserable. They will actually think less of you because they're paying you so little, and they will beat you up even more. So you don't want to outprice yourself, but you do want to be confident that like you're not being taken advantage of. And that'll be a very hard lesson for all the people coming out. And I'm sure after 30 years, I'm sure you've realized that, but it's a very hard road for everyone to navigate. but just don't undervalue yourself.
One thing I used to do when I was first starting out and I was a junior designer, I was so fortunate to like be working at a shop with so many talented people. I think there were like 17 motion designers and they were all like incredible. And I made lasting friendships with them, and I think the one thing that sort of helped me was we talked about what they were making, what each of us was making. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to like ask your friends in school. When you're looking for freelance gigs, like, oh, what did you charge? You know what I mean? And it's totally up to you, but I wouldn't be shy about telling them, this is what I charged for this, this is what they paid me. That way you guys understand that like when you're coming out and you're starting to work, these are your colleagues, around you. These are potentially going to be your coworkers, and these are also potentially going to be your competition for getting jobs. So like knowing what each other's charging can help you sort of navigate those waters and charge what you can to make a decent living.
And also, don't chase for the money. I know you have so much experience in this field. Chase, be you. Like, what's the unique things in you? So be you first. So the stuff in you is really unique. People will come into you. Money will come into you later. So don't think about I have to chase for the money stuff in order to make the art. Just let your passion out. Make the stuff, shine through your work, and then problem will solve later. So that's the mindset I always have in my mind. Don't think about money stuff first. Be good at the stuff I'm doing now. Then it's gonna pay off later.
Hi, I myself, I'm not good at illustrative art, so I write stories, I write scripts for those stories. And so being an individual who would be on the customer side of that transaction, what are ways that I myself can communicate my idea to you, the artist, that you would prefer that makes your lives like easier?
Good question.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I
Money.
particularly love the music side of stuff. I don't know how to do any of it, so I'm in complete awe in you being able to use Sibelius or Pro Tools or whatever. But like, I see a lot of really cool reels from sort of people that I really respect, and they all sort of have custom music for their reels. So I would say, if you're looking to sort of work with people like us, like that would be something that I would, personally be interested. I don't know how that would apply to specifically concept for AV though,
I think when you're approaching an artist, if you've decided you like that artist, and you've decided that you're like, I'm coming to this person because I like their work, trust them. Trust that they can show you something rough and loose and have a conversation early about things, and trust that they'll get there. A lot of times what happens with people is that because they don't know how to do things, they don't understand the process, and they can only see finished things. And it's very difficult to have a conversation about finished things because it's hard to get to that point. And if you get to that point, you've spent a lot of time doing it. But as a client, trust that they're good enough because you like them, and you say, let's have a conversation about what this is. And let's keep having conversations about it in the most rough way and just whittle that down to what you actually wanted, rather than them going off and doing something and you go, I didn't like that, But the more conversation and more trust you can have to that person, and just say like, I hired you because you're good. Now, you don't need to show me something amazing right now, but you do need to show me something of like, that I can at least understand where you're going. And if you look at it and you're like, that's not exactly what I want, at least if it's early and rough, you can steer it to where you want. But if you wait till like just the end point and you don't like it, well, that person's gonna be very frustrated. They spent a lot of time doing something you didn't like. Does that make sense? Like, be trusting of their ability, and talk to them in an early process. Like, do as much exploration in the beginning, and get there slowly rather than just letting them go off and do something. Because even if you don't know how to do that stuff, like, you have opinions, and you could see something, everyone can look at this stuff and have some sort of opinion on it, And I think that's all. I don't know. I've never really thought about that.
All right. Well, I just want everyone here to welcome me and thanking these awesome people for coming and giving this fantastic talk. Thank you so much, Concept Arts. And yeah, that was very informative. I learned a lot. I hope you all learned a lot, and I hope you at home also learned a lot. If you'd like to find out what Gnomon can do for you, go ahead and hit us up at gnomon.edu. If you want to stay up to date with Concept Arts, you can hit them up on social at Concept Arts. You can also hit us up on social at Gnomon School, and that's it. You're all done. You can get out of here. Y'all can get out of here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.